Hey guys, and welcome back to our Understand series study where we're looking at the structure of the book of Shemot. Today we continue that study in Parsha Yitro, which is the fifth Parsha in the book of Shemot or Exodus, and it is the 17th overall reading Parsha. So let's not wait. Let's go over to that now. The structure of Parsha Yitro, Sefer Shemot, or the book of Exodus. Let's look at this. Before we can go any further into this and start talking about the structure of this section, we need to stop and do a review. We need to review the overall structure of the book because we are in a transitionary place, in a place of change, a place of massive change, not only in our text, but what is contained in the text. What's in the text changes not only the ancient world, but it even changes the world as we understand it to this day. Okay? We are talking about the Parsha of transition. Okay? Parsha Yitro, chapter 18, verse 1 through 20 and 23, or 26 in Christian text. It contains three parts. The first part is the bondage and liberation, and that started in chapter 1, verse 1 through 17:16. Then part 2 is Torah and its precepts. That starts in chapter 18, verse 1 through 24 and 18. And then our third and final portion or part of the book of Shemot is the Mishkan, and the Mishkan is the tabernacle and its initiation. So that's chapter 25, verse 1, and that takes us to the end of the book of Exodus or Shemot in chapter 40, verse 38. Now, just quickly, I want to break down the subdivisions under these, not specifically, but just give you a number. So in the first part, we have 4 subsections. The second part, we have 3 subsections. And in the third part, we have 3 subsections. So today we will begin our Torah portion at this part. Part 2, Torah and its precepts, and that's chapter 18, verse 1 through 24 and 18. So this is our Torah portion, Yithro. This is a time of transition, as I mentioned earlier. This transition is major. So as we transition in the text, let's begin looking at our layout. Parsha Yitro contains 3 sections. The first section has 2 paragraphs and a conclusion. The second section contains 4 paragraphs and a conclusion. And the third section in today's Torah portion, we only get the extorium. We only get the introduction to the third section. So next video's Torah portion will continue section 3. So section 1 is Israel is welcomed as one of the nations of the world. Chapter 18, verses 1 through 27. What do we mean? There is a major event that takes place here. And what is that event? It's contained in our first paragraph. Yithro or Jethro visits Moses. And that's chapter 18, verse 1 through 12. And that's our first aliyah. Like in previous ones, we're going to actually look at that text. So 18:1 says, Now Jethro or Yithro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, how that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. And the last verse for this paragraph, the Hebrew paragraph, it says, And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God. And Aaron came and all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. This is our first paragraph in Parsha Yitro. The second paragraph is the advice to appoint judges and its acceptance. That's in chapter 18, verses 13 through 26. And this is Aliyah 2 and 3. Let's go and look at that. So this is 18:13, the second Aliyah, and it begins. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses set to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from the morning until the evening. That's verse 13. And as you can see, this aliyah ends in 23, but the actual paragraph ends in 26. So that takes us to our third aliyah, and it says, and they judged the people at all seasons. The hard cases they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. This is our second paragraph. Now, what we have is the conclusion of this section, section 1, and that's chapter 18, verse 27. So we'll go back to our third aliyah reading, and we'll read that last verse there to get this portion here. And it says, and Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went away into his own land. He went away unto his own land. That's the way section 1 ends. It begins with Yitro coming to visit. There are meetings and the appointment of judges, and then there is the departure of Yitro. This here, because Yitro is a priest in Midian, this is the acceptance of the nations. This is considered the acceptance of the nations of Israel being a nation. Now, the prior Torah portion ends with a war with the Amalekites. And these two stories are side by side, showing the war of Israel, the nation, and then the acceptance of the nation of Israel by Yithro. So we have here the acceptance, Israel as becoming one of the nations of the world. Hey, if you are getting anything out of this, if you've gotten value, just hit the like button. I'd really appreciate that. Now let's go ahead and look at our second section. The second section is the section that I was talking about earlier about the transition. The revelation at Mount Sinai. That's going to go from chapter 19, verse 1 through 20 and 21. The revelation at Mount Sinai. What is this? It is literally a new covenant that's being born, that is being created. This covenant still affects the world to this day. See, up until this point, the covenant that God was operating under and fulfilling was the Abrahamic covenant. That Abrahamic covenant was his progeny, the promise of nations coming from him, and it is a promise of land to a promised son. So that's what the Abrahamic covenant is. It's three parts. It's his progeny, that he would have nations born of him, that he would have a nation which would be the nation that would be God's nation, and then the land that he was dwelling in would be the land given to that chosen nation. So what we have here is a new covenant that's being established with that nation that is born out of Abraham, that is born of the seed of Isaac. So this is a new covenant that is being cut with the seed of Abraham. And they are known as the children of Israel. That's literally what this section is about. So, what is the very first paragraph in this monumental section? The preparations. And that begins in chapter 19, verses 1 through 15. And of course, that's in the fourth aliyah and the fifth aliyah. Let's jump over here and look at that. 19:1 says, in the third month after the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. That's the way this section begins. It continues to Aliyah 5 to the 15th verse. And there it says, and he said unto the people, be ready against the third day, come not near a woman. This is the first paragraph of our section. The second paragraph, the elements of nature in commotion. This is chapter 19, verse 16 through 19. And this is in Aliyah 5. Let's have a look. Chapter 19, verse 16. And it says, and it came to pass on the third day, when it was morning, that there were thunderings and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mountain, and the voice of a horn exceeding loud, and all the peoples that were in the camp trembled. This is the first portion of the second paragraph, and it continues to, and when the voice of the horn waxed louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him by a voice. That is the end of that paragraph, chapter 19, or excuse me, verse 19, and that's all in Aliyah 5. So, paragraph 3, the final instructions, that picks up in chapter 19, verse 20, and it lasts for 5 verses and go to 25. That's in Aliyah 6. Let's have a look at that. Aliyah 6. And it says in verse 20, and the Lord came down on the mountain, at the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. So we have Moses going up in the third paragraph, and it ends with Moses in chapter 19, verse 25. So Moses went down unto the people and told them. This is where paragraph 3 ends. Looking at our slideshow, paragraph 4, the Decalogue. This is also known as the 10 words. And since the translation of the King James Version has been called the 10 Commandments, in Hebrew, it's better known as the 10 words, the Decalogue. This is chapter 20, verse 1 through 17, and we will see that this is in Aliyah 6 and 7. Let's read over that right quick. And it begins here, Exodus 20 and 1. And God spoke all these things, saying, this takes us through the remainder of this Aliyah. And I will point out here that down here, okay, we have 2 sets of verses. We have the English translation and the Hebrew. Okay, so just to let you know, that's the reason there are 2 sets. This continues to Aliyah 7 and the 17th verse, and that verse reads, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. This is the end of paragraph 4. Let's look at our slideshow and see what the end of this is. It's the conclusion of this section, which is chapter 20, verse 18 through 21. And as we see, it's in Aliyah 7. Let's have a final look at Aliyah 7, and we will see 18 through 21. 18 says, "And all the people perceived the thunderings and the lightnings and the voice of the horn and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off." And then 21, "And the people stood afar off, but Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was." This ends section 2 right here. Section 3, which is the next section, let's look at our slideshow. That's the end of section 2. The next section, section 3, is statutes and ordinances, and this is where it begins in chapter 20, 22 through 23, 33. This is where the statute of ordinances is. Our Torah portion only takes us to chapter 20, verse 22 through 26. Now, I know I had a typo previously. That's not the case here. Let me show you on our slide. It's called the Extorium, Introduction Observations, Exodus 22b through 26. That ends our Aliyah. So let's look at our text. 22 says, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, Ye yourselves have seen that I have taught with you from heaven." Now our Torah portion ends in 26. "Neither shalt thou go up by the steps unto mine altar, that thy nakedness be not uncovered thereon." That's where our Torah portion ends. However, that's not where section 3 ends. This is just where our Torah portion ends. For whatever reason, the rabbis included the third section in this Torah portion. And this is something that's discussed by the rabbis. Well, like, why would they do this? And there's no real solid answer as to why, other than they did not want to end Torah portions in an unhappy state. So they left it right here with an instruction from God. So this is where it ends. So this section here is the end of our Torah portion, but it is the beginning of section 3, which is the final section of this part. Okay? So I hope that doesn't confuse you at all. I'm not trying to confuse you. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. Do you have any questions? I'd like to leave it here. I know I said a lot. I know I had a typo in the last one, but that's not the case here. I do not have a typo. I double, triple checked. No typo this time. Okay, guys? So just to let you know. Also, I want to thank you and let you know that here we have a previous video, the previous recording, and we also have a playlist for you if you'd like to go back through these. Also, take the time to subscribe. Thank you and have a very great week.